Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Divorce and Separation Coach podcast. Today, we're talking about existential therapy, and more specifically, how divorce can be experienced as an existential crisis. So, to enlighten us on this subject, I'm joined by not one, but two psychotherapists today. Ayse Hazir trained at Regent's University in London, where she focused on integrative psychotherapy and existential therapy. She has experience working with people going through divorce, domestic abuse, and sexuality difficulties. Dom Palmer Brown started his career in academics before retraining as an existential therapist. And he's passionate about existential therapy because it allows him to see and validate the experience of another human being. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me today.
Thank you for
Thank you.
inviting us, Chloe.
Happy to be here, Chloe.
It's great to have you because this is a really meaty topic, and I think one that needs to be a little bit better understood. So I'd love to start with asking Ayse for, I guess, starting with the basics. What, how do you define an existential crisis? What is it in true fact?
Um, when you were talking about divorce being experienced as an existential crisis, I mean, that is not a rule. It
Mhm.
is just in my experience, and there are very amicable divorces that are agreed by both people, although even that can cause some sort of rupture in
Mhm.
how a person is in the world.
Yeah.
But in my experience, majority of the cases, even if you are or the person is initiating divorce,
Hmm.
um, decision and the freedom of that, because you
Yeah.
are free to end a marriage, and,
Hmm.
and there will be a responsibility coming with it, and there will be a shift in the way you experience the world.
Yeah.
Marriage is not just past, present, but it's also your future. The loss
Hmm.
is very vast, but
Hmm.
that loss doesn't end as the cessation of a human being, but it's a complete transformation.
Yeah. So that's how you define existential crisis when you go through that kind of metamorphosis and you redefine your life. Is that how you would define it?
Absolutely, like the world as you know it has come to an end.
Yeah.
We need a new world now. There is this need, but going through the crisis, that's, I guess, where you are coming in, or we are coming in, and the individual's need for another human or guidance.
Yeah.
It's so multifaceted.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's definitely a massive change that happens in everybody's life at the time of divorce. And that can lead to a lot of people redefining themselves, especially if you've been married for many years and suddenly you're going to be single, or you're going to be a single parent, or you're going to become a new professional that where you haven't been working for a while. All of that is can be quite a radical change. Dom, did you want to add anything on that?
Yes, yes, as you say, it can be quite a radical change. And as Aisha was speaking, I was thinking about kind of anchor points, and we exist in relation to others in the world, but
Mm,
also in relation to where we live, our home, our colleagues, etc., etc. And when those things change, we're untethered, unanchored, and
yeah.
possibly quite disorientated, and going through an emotional crisis at the same time. So
Yeah.
this is a lot. There's just a lot happening. Yeah,
Yeah. And so
yeah,
why would we define divorce as an existential crisis rather than just an emotional one, for example?
yeah. Well, I think it's a very good question, and it is an emotional crisis, isn't it? Normally,
Mm,
it is relational, it is emotional, and we would say it is existential as well, because
yeah.
those reference points, the way we are in the world in relation to others, has basically been exploded, changed
Hmm.
fundamentally. Um,
Yeah.
those anchors, those tethers, those ways in which we orientate ourselves in the world, which
Yeah.
speaks to our way of being with people in the
Hmm.
world, has fundamentally shifted. And so, yes, it is. That's not to diminish the emotional aspect of it. It's also disorientating and
Yeah.
emotional and relational. It's all of those
Yeah.
things wrapped up together, I think. Unfortunately, quite difficult.
Yeah, so and that's why actually it's such that it's one of the most stressful situations we can experience in our lives is because
Yes,
all of these things we're used to relying upon are suddenly shifting, and we need to
yes.
redefine a lot of elements in our lives at that time.
And it is just and in a very simple way, it is an ending, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
also an
it is.
ending. So hence the comparison with bereavement, and and something that existed no longer exists.
Yeah, yeah, and in a lot of ways, new beginnings require something to end, but there's that mourning of what's ending as well, and that
Right.
processing of what's happened that needs to happen in parallel.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So I guess from your experience, can you talk to us a little bit about how an existential crisis challenges someone's sense of identity and their meaning in life?
Yeah, I mean, again, when it comes to divorce, there is like so as many divorces in the world as many different types of divorce. I think there is no divorce, the same as another one because people are different. Divorce is going to be very different. And so in my experience, uh, the way I work with my clients during this divorce period is I think we spoke before with you about what do I do with this freedom that I don't want.
Mhm. Yeah,
But that freedom is not only like, oh, I'm free to go out with new people, or it's not that. It is even bigger than that. It
yeah,
affects your children's life. It affects your parents' life, your social life, and you might have planned this divorce. You might have actually before even telling your spouse, you might have planned it, but even though the choice and the freedom that you have um, puts you in that place of as Dom said, disorientation. Am I
yeah.
doing the right thing?
Yeah, and I see that a lot. Again, especially I'm going to stereotype, but especially with women who have the tendency to be the caretaker in the family and whose identity might very much be about being a wife or being a mother. And that's suddenly shifting because they become potentially a part-time mother if they're sharing childcare with their ex. And they suddenly need to redefine themselves in this world because the role they had crafted for themselves isn't the same after the divorce.
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
that something you see a lot, Dom?
Yes, yes, very much the changing identity, changing role, changing nature of their purpose in the world, which was a sort of a given. It was a given. It was kind of obvious. Even if the marriage was going very badly, the pattern of the day was clear.
Hmm.
Take the kids to school, whatever it is, go to work, whatever it is, come back, have dinner together, even if they
Hmm.
weren't speaking, and so on. So all of that is taken away, and there is this kind of dizziness of freedom of not knowing where to turn, what to do, how to restructure life
Hmm.
in a meaningful way, and in the middle of that crisis, emotional disorientation as well. And so
Yeah,
our natural ability to make decisions, which are obviously guided by our emotions as well as our thoughts, is not there. The compass has
yeah,
been thrown away, and that's where the therapist comes in one way to be a kind of solid reference point, to really be there, to be fully present with that person suffering, but
yeah,
also as a kind of stability, as a reference point, something
yeah.
they can actually depend on week in, week out to bring their distress to.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's absolutely fundamental when you're going through an intense crisis like that. To be supported
yeah,
by the right people can
yeah.
really guide you through it and help you process what's happening.
Indeed, indeed, to really meet them where they are in their distress and stay with that for as long as it takes, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does the existential crisis manifest itself in practice? Are they specific thoughts or behaviors or feelings that emerge in that kind of situation?
Oh, that's a very good question. Um, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's visible, isn't it? Somebody's distress is visible.
Yeah.
But as Aisha was saying earlier, that there isn't one type of separation or divorce any more than there's one type of person. So it can be, as we know, somebody can present themselves as the calmest possible being in the world, but there's a volcano or turmoil within, or depression, deep depression. It can hit people in different ways, can't it? So that is part of the exploration. So your question is a brilliant one, and I don't think there's a standard answer except to go there, meet them where they are, gently inquire as to what their experiences are like, and to trust in the process. I think sometimes, and I'd be interested in Ayse's thoughts on this, is sometimes it's a bit, existential therapy is a bit of a leap of faith in that you're gently revealing what is there, what the experience is like, because you believe that by doing that, it will open something up, the meanings will reveal themselves. And obviously that can be a long process with divorce and separation before somebody finds a kind of new meaningful life by themselves or with another partner or however. That could take a long time. But I think there can be glimpses of that along the way. I'm thinking of somebody who going through a crisis, separation crisis, and we were talking about what she does with her spare time when there wasn't spare time before. It's alone time, and how going for a walk in the park becomes something very meaningful for her. And we explore that as connection with nature, which can be quite profound, especially in times of distress. But it's not that I would say to a client, you need to go for a walk in the park. It's just that that's something that she came out as
that worked for her. Yeah. Okay. Have you seen these kind of differences in people you work with and how they're finding coping mechanisms through this crisis?
So guys, I apologize. I lost you for 2 minutes of DOMS. I don't know if I was frozen. You could tell, but where were you at? Because I realized I was having a connection problem.
Yeah, well, I was answering Chloe a question about how we see the signs of the existential crisis, of the client's distress and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the major theme that comes up in my work with the clients is, existential crisis, a big umbrella, and there's another one called existential guilt.
Yeah.
So this is a bit of a different guilt than, your friend invited you somewhere, you didn't go, then, there's a guilt. There's a guilt on wrongdoing. Like, I've done something wrong, I'm going to apologize, or you're not going to. What are you going to do with this guilt? But the existential guilt, how is experienced in divorce is, again, around, I keep bringing it up, is around freedom and choice. Did I do the right thing? And that could then manifest itself into a neurotic guilt, or like in a neurotic behaviors, like self-destructive behaviors. The person that might lead a person to act in ways that is completely unusual to that person. We don't just tell a person, oh, you're experiencing existential guilt, but I have seen that with my clients who left houses in which their spouse were abusing them, abusing the children. Anyone who would hear the marriage, anyone would say run for your life. But even those people I have seen not processing that guilt might result in that, what we call the existential guilt. So it manifests in itself in ways that the person is unable to understand. And I think during therapy, the source of this guilt, because when a person has this belief that there is a right decision and wrong decision, in existential therapy there is a decision. And the truth is, the way I orient myself, when my client asks, should I leave my husband or should I not leave my husband, or the wife, often I realize people are in this illusion that there is the right answer. But actually there is no right answer.
Right. That's very hard for people to accept, because we're told, from school already, there's right and wrong, and everything is around that duality of decision making. And sometimes it's just about making the best decision with what you've got, right? In the context you're in. But I
Yes,
can absolutely imagine that you don't have a lot of people coming to you saying, I'm facing an existential crisis. They actually
no,
come to you with the symptoms and this is how I'm feeling. And
yeah,
that's where you uncover when you start peeling the onion that
yeah.
there is really that deeper crisis below all of the symptoms that they're expressing.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think that that whole thing about decision making and binary decision making
Hmm.
is a pressure of our society, on
Yeah.
being decisive, knowing what you're doing. But part of the therapy is also staying with the uncertainty,
Yeah.
because this is one of the things that we would want to reveal itself when it's ready, you know,
Hmm.
when the egg is cooked, So that's
Yeah.
we don't know how long, but how many minutes it's going to take really, because or how many months or whatever, because but we'll know when it's ready because
Hmm.
we'll have a
Yeah.
sense of it, and as opposed to, oh, I have to make a decision whether to leave my partner, or I have to make a decision whether to sell my home, or whatever it is. Do you, there's, do you have to, or you've also got the decision not to make the decision, which
Yeah.
I should say, the decision not to do something is also a decision. Yeah,
Absolutely. And people forget that option.
yeah,
Even I say even with my children, I say, what can you do to address the situation, this problem you've got? They never
yeah,
think of the option of just not doing anything and just waiting to see what happens,
yeah.
and maybe letting things happen and unfold on their own.
We
But
talk about
Ayse was
dwelling
talking
sometimes.
earlier about it was talking about freedom, and I feel
Yeah,
like the flip side of freedom is that uncertainty, because it means that you're also, you don't know what's going to happen. You're going to have to accept that you're going to make decisions as they occur, and I see uncertainty as being really um, uncomfortable for a lot of people, and that's what makes divorce so stressful for people. You're making all these decisions and again, you don't know if they're right or they're wrong. You don't know how they're going to pan out in 5 years' time, 10 years' time.
no.
All you can do is make the best decision with the information you have in that moment. But how does existential therapy deal with that sense of uncertainty?
Sure.
Maybe I should.
Um, First of all, I think when I, have a client who's, because uncertainty causes so much anxiety.
It does.
Because we humans makes, we want to make sure we know things. We can predict the future. And isn't that partly why we get married? Then we know I'm gonna get old with this person. The search is ended. So we do everything to avoid uncertainty. And
Hmm.
divorce is that the uncertainty it brings to you is so hard to deal with.
Yeah.
And you are sitting there and I don't know, next you had everything planned out. You had summers somewhere, you had winter holidays, you had what to do. There's so much uncertainty, but not only on the physical realm, but also
Yeah. Will
emotional.
I meet someone else? Will I be a good parent on my own? Those kind of things.
And will that person be good to my children? And how will my children be affected by this divorce? Oh, I am responsible for causing so much pain. And for what? So for the uncertainty. So this is a lot to work through.
Yeah.
And all the emotions also mixed up doesn't help the legal process, which is a real
No.
thing. As you have these legal things, you have your children, so much to deal with. Emotions gets mixed up. A
Yeah.
lot of people end up trying to punish the partner. All these can be dealt smoothly, more, at least not smoothly, but more smoothly if done with help or with.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
That that makes a lot of sense, and it makes me think about this sort of idea of being grounded in being ungrounded. We're never really sure what's going to happen. We can be in the happiest marriage in the world, but there can be an accident tomorrow or something, or an illness or something. It's
Yeah.
not just divorce. So, in fact, we all live with uncertainty every day, but we don't look at uncertainty every day. We look away.
True.
And then, as Aisha described, it's thrown at us. You're confronted with it in a volcanic kind of way with divorce. But actually, if I also see when people are emerging from what we're saying is an existential crisis into uh, their new world, they also have a gift, which is they've been through such great emotional and other forms of uncertainty, and they've come through it. And maybe there's a lesson in that. Not that I would want anyone to have to go through that, but we all do eventually go through some crisis in our life, maybe
Yeah,
not divorce, but something else, and we come out of it slightly different.
yeah,
And and there is something there. There's a gift there, an opportunity to find meaning in uncertainty, which
yeah,
is can be exciting. It can be, wow,
absolutely.
I don't know what's happening tomorrow. You don't feel like that when you're getting divorced, but eventually
Yeah,
somebody might wake up one day and say, actually, I can just decide what to do with my day today.
yeah,
That's a gift, and
absolutely.
find meaning in those moments rather than the kind of stultified meaning, if it's a bad marriage, of I know what's happening today.
Mhm.
That's a kind of false certainty, a sort of stuckness rather than
Yeah. And it's true in a lot of ways, the crisis that divorce is in our lives is also an opportunity in many ways because how often in your life do you get to redesign everything or a lot of it, unless you're
yeah,
doing a radical career change or you're moving
yeah,
abroad.
yeah,
Usually in our adult life, we're kind of just plodding along and,
yeah,
things evolve and happen to us. This is a real clear junction where you
mm,
can redefine things and you can change things in your life that you don't like or that you weren't happy with. And
hmm,
that can be very overwhelming. But if you see the positives,
yes,
it's also a unique opportunity.
yeah, eventually, yes,
Eventually, exactly.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
And is an existential crisis necessarily time bound? Or, I mean, I always tell my clients the thing about divorce is that at some point it ends. It may take 10 years in court, but it will end at some point. Is it the same for the crisis itself, or can that keep on going after for quite a while?
I think it really is very different person to person because
Mm,
often what we see is the divorce comes at the same time a lot of people go through midlife crisis.
true.
So which can be also seen as another existential crisis,
Hmm.
midlife.
Yeah,
What is
yeah.
midlife? You come middle of your life, you look back and you look forward and you are not happy where you are.
Hmm.
And you try to find sometimes people will try to find someone to blame. And often we see divorces happening in the midst of midlife
Yeah,
crisis.
yeah.
Hmm.
And when and Dom, you said something, we look away from uncertainty. And I
Mm,
think in midlife crisis, uh,
hmm.
almost you want to look into the uncertainty.
Hmm.
When
Hmm.
people kind of want to do everything that is does not resemble anything else they had in the past, good or bad. So when
Hmm.
they join together, and I think they're not dealt with, that can
Hmm.
Hmm.
be, like there are people in their 70s still acting like they are still in their midlife crisis. They haven't found meaning in life
Yeah.
because I like that Dom was talking about meaning and how we might lose meaning during divorce, and you will probably lose and find, but
Hmm.
some people, you have to be courageous to look
Mhm.
into that and find a new meaning to get
Yeah.
rid of
Yes,
that
yeah,
crisis.
yeah. I like this idea that a midlife crisis is in search of an existential crisis. Yes, it's searching. I'm going to create one.
Yeah, well, that's
Um,
what it is. It's rocking the boat because it gets a bit
Exactly.
too quiet. And
yeah,
we see it,
yeah.
there's a real emergence of what they call gray divorce. The rates of people getting divorced much later in life
Yeah.
are increasing highly, and it's partly because life expectancy is increasing. And it used to be when you were in your 60s, you kind of stuck it out. There weren't that many years left, and now you're thinking, well, I've got 20, 30 years ahead of me. I don't want
Mm,
to spend them with this person. And so,
yeah.
I think midlife is also kind of shifting as well to later in life, if you in number of years that you've lived.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that this thing about how long the crisis lasts and I think sometimes the impact of the experience can last for decades afterwards, can't it? And it's very sad if there's this kind of unresolved issues from there. Let's face it, many people going through divorce will not necessarily find help from people such as yourself, Chloe, or from existential or any other kind of therapist. They'll go through it, they'll stumble through it, they'll be resilient, but they'll be damaged in some way and
Yeah.
never really talk that through, feel that through, think that through. And years later, the way they are in relationships or not in relationships is impacted by that. So I think that I'd love to say that there's a kind of timer where the existential crisis or the whole crisis, in whichever way we wish to look at it, is over because it's a
Yeah.
couple of years later. But I think for some people, it probably doesn't quite get resolved in that way.
Yeah.
They,
I think
they,
that's a
they,
fair point. Yeah, I mean, the administration of the divorce always has an
yeah,
end, but the
yeah,
experience, the personal experience, can go on for a very long time. There's people who never let go, who are still resentful of, whatever their ex did 30, 40
yeah,
years before.
Yeah.
yes.
And it's true that not having taken the time to deal with it is going to make it that much harder to move on.
Yes,
So
and the nature of the relationship can stay with them. I'm thinking about
yeah,
some clients who talk to me of experiences of partners from 10, 20 years ago, and how much emotion there is around having a phone call from them.
mm,
There's still something
years and years
there,
later,
which has not been worked through. Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
So that's actually a very good segue into my last question, which I was trying to end on a positive note. Uh, so for people who are experiencing divorce and are experiencing it as an existential crisis, what kind of support do you both offer as existential therapists to help them through that?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, you can start exactly if you like.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I always think of with clients, all clients, is to meet them where they are,
Mhm.
to explore with them what they're experiencing that day, that week, at the moment, first of all. And
Mhm.
often they want to pour out a whole story, the story of their life or the crisis, which is fine. We're there to listen. We're there to connect with their experience and then gently explore their experience and to really be there for them in a way that they can absolutely depend on for as long as they need to.
Yeah,
But as we gain that therapeutic relationship builds and the trust builds, it gives us a firm foundation to to be a bit more exploratory, to be a bit more
yeah,
challenging about what is really going on for them and what they really want, and really to stay with them through the whole crisis, and ultimately um, to guide them or to walk alongside them as they explore options for the future
yeah,
that in the middle of the crisis they won't be able to see. But we have that leap of faith, that belief that by gently exploring that territory with them,
mhm,
it's like coming through the mist. Something will clear. Something
yeah,
will clear. They'll see the clearing. They'll see something that they really do look forward to.
yeah.
And
And Sue, what would you say?
how I work is the thing is, you can't really like even if if you're a client of an existential therapist or a psychodynamic or there are very subtle differences. And the way I work, especially I work with a lot of people who are going through divorce, and I often start with their beliefs because
Mhm,
I find their beliefs that they might not even aware of it stands in between
Mhm.
finding new meaning in life or new life. All for me is the same thing. When it can be depressed state, it can be, have developed a panic attack. Some of them develop OCD out of blue. And there's lots of different manifestations, and some
yeah,
some will just feel normal, but they also feel something is not normal. They are going their day, but I work through a lot of the times with beliefs
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
what was their values and beliefs? What
Yeah.
happened to those values and beliefs with this decision? Either they
Hmm.
took or the other part took. Because
Mhm.
if they took, I told you, this is like there's a lot of, I seen existential guilt around the decision that the person gave. Or if you are the spouse who were left, and working through beliefs, that what happened to you, you
Yeah.
know what does that mean that you were left, working through beliefs. I feel that we can go to the core of what stands in between this
I
Yeah,
like that.
this
yeah,
meaningful
yeah.
life.
That
And
that that yes, yes, absolutely. And that word belief is also around what they believe about what happened in the relationship. I think that's part of what you were saying, Aisha. And there can be a lot of distress and confusion around that, around infidelity, for example.
Yeah.
Thinking that somebody was X, but they're actually Y. But all those years I thought it was this, and it's actually that. I thought we had a good sex life, or I thought we had a good relationship, and it turns out we had a rubbish one. How could I be so misguided?
Yeah.
You know, well, how could I get that so badly wrong? So there's self-criticism as well,
I hear a
blaming
lot of that.
oneself.
Yeah.
A lot of that. I heard a client say that the other day. I've got to learn the lesson from this. What did I do wrong? And it's
Yeah.
heart-wrenching because they've just been left by somebody and they think they
Yeah.
have done something wrong.
Where they
Uh,
think that their whole life was a lie. I get that a lot as well
yes,
with
yes,
clients where,
yes,
especially because sometimes in the upset of the divorce, things get said along the lines of, I haven't loved you in 10 years, or,
uh-huh,
I've wanted to leave you for a long time. And then suddenly the other person is completely, looking at their past in a completely new lens and trying to analyze it completely differently and to, as you say,
yes,
learn the lessons. But it's very much tinted by what they've been told by the other person. And
mm,
the other one I hear a lot is the sense of failure. I mean, we people regularly
sure,
refer to divorce as a failed
yeah,
marriage, which I
uh-huh,
absolutely abhor that terminology. But that sense of
mm,
I didn't succeed, which I always find quite interesting because if you change jobs or careers, no one's going to say you failed at your previous. They say, oh great, you've got a new project,
yeah,
you move
yeah,
houses, you move countries. But for some reason, changing relationships is seen as
yes,
a failure, and that's
yeah,
very hard for people to digest as well.
yeah,
and I think this is where we look at the beliefs around, you just said failed marriage. So what is a successful marriage?
Yeah,
How did you project yourself to the future? What did, your past, how does your past inform us about
yeah,
your beliefs? And, kind of reorienting yourself
yes,
or herself,
yeah,
herself.
yes, yes.
yeah,
And there are the expectations, aren't there, around friends and family and everyone in society who we might imagine that they're going to feel, what did they do wrong, or
yeah,
something's not up with them, that that they have failed. You might actually feel
yeah,
that other people think you have failed,
yeah.
um, and that self-image is questioned.
And it never stops giving. You're a divorced parent watching a nice movie with your children who went through divorce pretty much, let's say, unscattered. But then in the theme of the movie, there is a nice touch. The divorced parents get together. And then
Yeah,
this never gives it, there's always a reference. And
Yeah,
then there will
sure.
be a song. So it is, even if you found a new meaning in life,
Yeah,
you'll be reminded of
yeah,
a lot of these things. And I think it's so important to be ready, so important to be supported, because when feel alone, that's I think really hard.
yeah, 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 yeah. It
and
is. I
I
mean,
see it. Sorry, go ahead, Don.
sorry, yes, that whole thing about isolation and aloneness, being thrown out into the world again alone, sort of as it were, reborn into as a lonesome individual in the world, and
Yeah,
that can feel very, very powerful for
yeah,
many people. That because they are disorientated and alone and
Yes.
struggling with the practicalities, logistics of the divorce, all at the same time. I mean, it's a total overwhelm, really, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what we have to be with as therapists, and recognize the intensity of that and the confusion of that and the hurt and everything else.
It's
Yeah.
a very common theme, with parents who suddenly have to share that, with the other parent, once they're divorced, they don't have their children all the time. That void when the children are
Oh,
not in their care.
Yeah,
What do
when they
I
would
do
have
with
been.
myself? Christmas is the
Yeah.
one that is always very sensitive when you're not with your
Mm,
children at Christmas. And what
mm,
do I do with that big emptiness and almost too much
yeah.
freedom? As Ayse was saying earlier about
Yeah.
freedom. I don't want that freedom. I'd much rather have my responsibilities towards my children because that's familiar, that's comfortable.
Yeah. Yes, and that's the kind of existential, I don't exist as a parent because
Mm,
normally I would be with my kids. Where are they? I'm not with them. Something has
yeah,
gone fundamentally wrong. Mm,
absolutely.
mm, mm.
So I'm just conscious of time. We're going to wrap up, but I have to say the kind of support that you offer is so important in the context of divorce in general, but specifically with my lens of divorce. And I can see how processing all of this and addressing the feelings that are coming from the crisis can be so important in how people then address the actual divorce itself. And I can
Mhm.
see how the lack of processing and people who aren't getting support from people like both of you are much less operational, much less
Mm.
able to make all these big decisions that are required during divorce and navigate that process a lot less skillfully and a lot less comfortably. So it really is about getting the right support from the right individuals to help you through that entire, all the spheres of the divorce, all the different implications. So
Sure.
thank you both very,
absolutely.
very much. I really enjoyed
Thank
this
you.
conversation. Thank you for sharing all your
So did I.
insights.
Thank
Thank
you both.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Andrew, bye.
Bye.